how much does it actually cost to start an Airbnb business in 2026? Most people are still working off numbers from a few years ago, and that number has changed. So in this video, I'm gonna be breaking down every real cost you need to get your first property live, and I'm gonna be showing you exactly how people are funding it, even without a big pile of savings sitting in the bank. Get this number wrong, and you either never start, or you start and run out of money halfway through. A lot of people don't know how much furniture costs. It all really depends on how big the property is. So first things first, I wanna break this down by 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. So first things first, the best rule of thumb is for a 1 bedroom property, on average, you're looking at about $4,000 in furniture. For a 2 bedroom property, you're looking at about $5,000 in furniture. And then for a 3 bedroom property, you're looking at about $6,000 in furniture. Typically what I do is if you add another bedroom, I add an extra $1,000 with the base being $4,000 for a 1 bedroom. Again, this is on average. So you may spend closer to $4,500 for a 1 bedroom or $5,500 for a 2 bedroom, or even $6,500 for a 3 bedroom. Now, this is something that we do get a little bit more granular in once we are actually in the process of furnishing it. We do want to make sure we're budgeting correctly on how much exactly we're putting into the property. But this is a really good rule of thumb just to give you guidance on how much you're going to be using to furnish the property that you land. Another misconception that a lot of people have is either renting furniture or finding properties that have furniture already in there from the landlord or the property management group. I like to avoid these things for a couple of reasons. We always go after unfurnished properties for 2 reasons. 1, the rent is going to be less, which means we're going to profit more monthly. And 2, we just like to buy our own furniture because we want to design the property how we want. Don't forget, we are designing this property with a long-term traveler in mind. So we want to make sure that we're putting in the right amenities, the right bed frames, the right couches, the TVs, like all that stuff does go a long way. And that's going to help you really attract these corporate professionals that we want. Also, just to add, so this $4,000, $5,000, or $6,000 furniture setup is also going to include everything like linens, right? Soaps, the actual supplies for the property, microwaves, toasters, stuff like that. That's all included. So don't have a misconception of like only couches or only bed frames or bed mattresses, right? This is including everything needed to get this property live on Airbnb. And that's the budget that you're going to make for these size of properties. So bottom line, properties or apartments through the bedroom size of 1 to 3 bedrooms are going to cost about $4,000 to $6,000 in furniture and startup costs to get the property live. Now, if you're going after bigger houses, let's say 4 to 5, 6 bedrooms, again, we don't do much of that here, but you are going to be looking to spend closer to $10,000, maybe $12,000 plus to furnish those bigger homes. Now, another big tip that I want to give you guys, this is something that I do all the time, is every time an Amazon Prime Day does come along, right? Anyone that doesn't know what this is, it's when they give massive discounts. When these days do come along, I usually stock up on a lot of necessities that I need for the property, let alone the supplies like the soaps, the linens, or all that good stuff. It's always good to continue to restock on that. You have to do that monthly, but I like to do it at least every quarter when they have these Amazon Prime Days a couple times out of the year. I'll buy bigger stuff on massive discounts and I'll buy them in bulk. So a lot of the times I have storage units in my markets where my team has access to the extra supplies, extra linens, all of that stuff. And on these Amazon Prime Days, I'll actually load up on bed frames. I'll load up on coffee tables. I'll load up on the small stuff that I do get from Amazon to furnish the property just to have there. So in the future, when I'm ready to launch more properties, I have a lot of that stuff already in my storage unit. I don't have to reorder it. Plus I got a massive discount. In the long run, I promise you, and I've done the numbers, I've done the math. Over the year, if you were to buy it not on Amazon Prime Day, and let's say you're launching 5 units compared to you buying it on an Amazon Prime Day, like all the bed frames, the coffee tables, right? All those bigger things, you're going to save a boatload of money. And as a business owner, when you could, I don't want to use the word cutting corners, but when you could find ways to save little money like that, and you are scaling a big business, it's going to go a long way. And you're going to allow yourself to keep a lot of money in your pocket. The next cost is your rent and your deposit. Now, this one scares a lot of people more than it should. So rent and security deposit is going to vary, of course, on the market that you're in and the size of the property. The best rule of thumb is your security deposit is usually going to match your first month's rent. Let's say you're signing a 1 bedroom property and let's say the rent is $1,500 a month. Typically 9 out of 10 times, the security deposit is going to match that. So it's going to be an additional $1,500. So you're all in at $3,000 total for your first month's rent and your security deposit. Now, let's say you're going after bigger properties, let's say 2 bedroom property or a 3 bedroom property, or let's say even you're going after a 5 bedroom home. The rent and the security deposit is going to be a little bit more. So let's just say, for example, $3,500 a month for rent. Your security deposit is typically going to be $3,500 as well. So it's going to be costing you in total around $7,000. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind is the security deposit really isn't gone, right? Like the first month's rent, yeah, you're paying that. You're not going to see that back, but the security deposit is more so just a hold, right? That's just more so giving the landlord or the apartment complex comforting feeling that you're going to take care of the property and that you're putting money down just in case any damage does happen. It makes them feel a little bit more comfortable in working with you. Now, I do want you to realize that, hey, certain points, whether it's year in, 2, 3 years working through relationships, you can get these security deposits back, or even on future properties that you sign leases with, you can actually maybe pay half half security deposit or no security deposit as well. So that's a massive portion that I help a lot of my students on as they're scaling their portfolios. Again, finding ways to save money, and one of that being security deposits, putting less down or even getting that back. So you're not tying up money and having it sit there. But again, just moral of this is that security deposit, you always get it back. Let's say when you do break the lease years down the road, or you do go ahead and take on more properties from the landlord, sometimes they carry over security deposits. So there's a bunch of things that they can do. I do want you guys to keep that in mind, is that security deposit is more of a hold and you will get that back. A small unit puts you around $3,000 for rent and security deposit combined, and a bigger home puts you around $7,000. There's a handful of smaller costs people forget about. On their own, they're small, but they can add up fast. Now, these small costs are going to consist of photographer fees, right? When you get a professional photographer in, LLC setup, software setup, and maybe some trial cleans when you trial run cleaners to see which one you're going to bring on. These costs are a little bit outside of the furniture costs that we first spoke upon. So let me break down what you're going to need to budget for this specifically. So first things first, for anyone who knows business, you have to open up an LLC. This is very cheap. I would budget at most $200. We have all of our students go through what we use on how we open up LLCs. It's usually about 60 to 80 bucks. It is very seldom, but we do need to knock that out of the way. Now, for softwares, you're looking at less than $100 a month in total, and you won't be paying for these softwares until the property is live. So this is more of a fixed cost, but it's not going to be essentially coming out of your pocket. We're going to be paying this off with the bookings from the actual unit itself. Now, for professional photographer, I would budget about $350 to $400 for this. It could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more. This is not something we want to cheap out on. We do want to take really good photos of our listing, because think of it this way. When you go to a first round interview, you're not going to show up in a t-shirt and sweatpants, right? You're going to show up in a suit and a tie or a very nice business casual dress, something that's really standing out, because first impression matters. It's the same thing when it comes to Airbnb. When guests are scrolling on the platform and they see a property that has listing photos that stand out, well, they're going to click on that and that's going to convert to more bookings. So finding a really good professional photographer is not something we want to cheap out on. So I'd budget around those numbers. Now, for trial cleans for cleaners, typically you're probably going to spend $50 to $100 per trial clean. I would budget about $300 at most for this. Let's say if you do trial 3 to 5 cleaners, typically you could find a really good cleaner in 3, at most 4 trial cleans in total. So really, all in all, you're looking about maybe budgeting about $600 at most for all of these things that aren't really calculated into the startup cost. Again, it's really seldom when you look at it from a big picture, but it's not something that we want to forget about when we're calculating everything that we're putting into this property. At this point, you should have a really good idea on how much is needed to start an Airbnb business in 2026. If you do need a little bit more guidance, I'm going to go ahead and drop you the exact furniture kit that I use for all my properties and that all my students use. So go ahead and check that out in the description. Let's put it all together so you have one real idea as to how much it really costs to start an Airbnb in 2026. Now, on the low end for the furniture and the supplies of the unit, but then also the miscellaneous stuff that we talked about, for 1 to 3 bedroom properties, you're looking at about $5,000 to $8,000 total to actually get that property up and running. And on the bigger end, let's say for 4, 5, even 6 bedroom properties, you're going to be looking at about 10, 12, even up to $15,000 for furniture. Also those small miscellaneous costs that we talked about before. Another thing that I do want to add in here, again, we always want to buy new furniture, but we want to keep in mind a certain budget, right? So when we are going after these properties and we have a really good idea that, hey, we're launching a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom house, we really want to have a budget set in place, and we don't want to go over that, because we know, okay, we do want to do a really good job furnishing the property, not getting like super cheap furniture, but we also don't want to go out there and go crazy and buy a $5,000 couch, because that's just going to eat into your margins. It's going to take you a little bit longer to break even. And that's why these numbers to go off are going to be really, really crucial for you guys just to use as a baseline as you kind of launch and furnish your own properties. So the real answer is somewhere between $5,000 and about $7,000 for these 1 to 3 bedroom properties. For bigger properties, you are going to be looking about $10,000 to $15,000 total. You might be thinking that's a lot of money to come up with. So here's how most people cover it, including myself when I first got started. The most important thing when we are starting this business, guys, is leveraging OPM. That's other people's money. And by doing that, we're able to apply for 0% interest business credit cards and actually pull out these credit lines from the bank with 0% interest. So although we're not always able to put our first month's rent, security deposit on these business credit cards, we can put all the furniture costs and those miscellaneous costs on these 0% interest credit cards. This way we're not touching our liquid capital in our savings or our checkings account. This is going to give you the opportunity to scale much, much faster because you're leveraging the bank's money at 0% interest. So after that year comes around and that 0% interest runs out, because typically they give you about 12 months of that 0%, well, you have multiple properties by then. You just pay the card off in full. The best cards that I like are going to be from Chase and Amex. Amex offers 2 0% interest business credit cards at the moment. I believe one's a business cash and one's a business plus. And then for Chase, they make a business unlimited and an in cash. Those are both really good cards as well. I really recommend building good relationship with both of those those banks and they'll be able to give you some really good credit lines as long as you have a good personal credit score. And typically what I see a tip for you guys is around a 700 to 800 credit score is going to give you the best odds to getting really good credit lines so you can leverage these 0% interest cards. So once the property is up and running, you want to go ahead and just make the minimum payment on these 0% interest business credit cards. So let's say you get a $10,000 line. Let's say you put $6,000 of furniture costs on that credit card. Your monthly payoff for that card is going to be maybe a couple $100s a month. You just make that payment with the profit from the property. Again, once the year comes around and that 0% interest runs out, you've probably paid off maybe $4,000 or $5,000 worth of that card, maybe a little bit less. But then you just go ahead and just pay the card off in full. This way you're not getting hit with interest. And what you're doing, essentially, you took their $6,000, used it to launch your property instead of taking your $6,000 out of your pocket, and then you just paid those minimal monthly payments with 0% interest. So the real number you need in cash up front is usually a lot smaller than the total cost because credit is covering the rest. So now you know what it costs and how to fund it. But seriously, none of that matters if you can't get a landlord to say yes in the first place. Most beginners get rejected before even they start pitching because they honestly just lead with the wrong thing. So in this next video, I'm going to walk you through the exact questions that qualifies a landlord in the first 10 seconds and the word for word pitches that's going to get you closer to a yes.